Every intellectual has to eventually contend with nihilism. I contended with it when I was 16. Many other intellectuals contend with it, usually around that time as well. This could be related to the fact that around your early 20s, nihilism tends to creep into your life. You have usually been working a job, or you have had to contend with some upheaval in your life that has resulted in you questioning, what's ultimately the point? Why should I care? Shouldn't it be easier? Wouldn't it be easier if I just accepted nothing mattered and I lived in the world like that? Many have had that intrusive thought. And that's what I want to discuss today. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jack Garraway Fyson, otherwise known as Science Gecko. And nihilism has always interested me. I spent quite a while trying to analyse it, because it really irked me that one of the grounding philosophies of modern society is that nothing matters. This seemed completely incongruent with the experience that I've had. People go around in their day-to-day lives pursuing, if you adopt nihilism, utterly arbitrary means. They want this desire. They pursue this goal. Yet, to what end? If it's all nihilistic, surely we can just get rid of it, no? Surely we could eschew with these human needs and transcend the foolish phenomenological elements of our lives and understand that we are simply meaningless. And yet we don't. Moreover, there is a subset of people that actively go against it. How could they, if you adopt the materialist view? And that's why I studied it. Within my studies, I realized something quite interesting. Nihilism, not conclusively, but correlatively, appears to be associated with depression, to the degree that there's a debate whether or not nihilism actually functions as its own philosophy, or if it's simply a byproduct of depression. I treat nihilism as a byproduct of depression, because as an actual philosophy, excluding Nietzsche's proclamations that we live in error pretty much all the time, which I suppose could be construed as nihilistic, as he is seen as the father of nihilism. I believe that's most depicted in his Will to Power, which I have not read yet. Unless you consider that, nihilism doesn't really have much philosophical weight. It appears to simply be the existential result of materialism, the natural succession, and I find this to be very interesting, but ultimately unsatisfying, and I suppose that's the whole point of nihilism. See, the reason I adopt psychological nihilism, or more accurately, interpret nihilism as psychological, is because you find that people who are not depressed tend not to have nihilistic tendrils factoring into their realities very often. They're usually focused on achieving higher goals, usually focused on what they particularly want at that time, or pushing themselves to be greater. See, nihilism is an inherently narcissistic and entrapping philosophy. If you're a nihilist, you don't have to care about anything, nothing matters. I believe that's the whole idea of Rick and Morty, the whole idea of Rick. The nihilist within an absurdist world, completely apathetic from everything around them. Yet, he isn't, as you see in the show. So, why is it adopted like it's this accepted axiom if it could be associated with depression? Well, there's a few theories to that. One could be we live in a relatively mentally unstable society. It's been well noted that a majority of mental illnesses have only arisen in the modern day. We've had multiple arguments within the medicalization of psychology that, well, things like ADHD, OCD, all of these things, are they characterizations of particular phenomena, or have they just crept up in modern day because we have to diagnose everything? That is a big psychological debate. So it isn't surprising that nihilism is a byproduct of that, or at least could be. It also makes sense that religion is a natural counter to nihilism. The meaningful narrative, the entirely phenomenological. Another facet of nihilism, which I have hitherto omitted, is the relativist section of nihilism. Because nothing matters, there's the line of philosophical thinking that everything must be equal then. There's no reason for your opinion to triumph someone else's, because why should they get a higher point? Why should they get more praise? You're both as meaningless as one another. As a result, adopt relativism. Every single belief is fundamentally equal, and your entire reality shouldn't be questioned because it's your reality. Who cares? It's all meaningless anyway. See, I do care, because I find that those lines of philosophy are fundamentally incoherent, such that they end up eating themselves. That's the dragon eating its own tail. I believe that was best described by Jordan Peterson. Or they are fundamentally too pernicious to be a coherent philosophy. Any philosophy that tries to promote meaninglessness is fundamentally an unsatisfying philosophy, because have you really taken everything into account in order to do that? In order to claim that? Have you taken every single element into account? See, the majority of people don't even realize they're nihilistic. They accept these factors because they don't understand the world and reality they live in. They assume, because of the influx of scientific information, that the meaningless narrative that is purported should be axiomatically accepted, and human relevancy, human attributes like emotion, can be omitted. They can be ignored, but that is inherently problematic, because you are missing the entire essence of what makes up society. Now, you could argue, and in fact I would like someone to argue, because I always enjoy a debate, that society is irrelevant, because it's inherently amaterial or immaterial. As a result, the material rationalism of science, that's best seen as objective. And objectivity naturally leads to nihilism, because if you look at objects as simple material things that make up the world, what's the relevancy of a collection of atoms interacting in particular ways? What's the importance of quantum mechanics? Well, none if you're a materialist, but if you're an immaterialist, and you give credit to the psychology of people and the phenomenology, you realize that there's so much more meaning in those concepts. See, that's what got me out of nihilism. The reason I'm not a nihilist, nor am I a materialist, is that I realized the world could not fundamentally run off of objective material fact. The universe and logic runs off of material fact. But human psychology, that's immaterial by its very essence. We don't even know where half of this tat is. So of course it's going to be immaterial. And by being immaterial, and yet having such an effect that our entire world is built on it, nihilism tends to fall short. Because unless you're trying to ignore the drive impulses that are affecting you, arguably, from a psychoanalytic perspective, a form of denial, it's very hard to be a nihilist, especially when you have human desire. And it's not enlightenment to claim that it's okay to ignore that. That's one of the biggest problems in the modern day. We are incongruent with the drive impulses that make us who we are. See, something very interesting that I heard in a Jordan Peterson video last night, but I also thought about it myself a while ago, is the impact of music. See, in the Jordan Peterson video, he elaborated on the idea that music transcends nihilism. Now that's very interesting, because it is a good interpretation. People still listen to music and still react to music even if you're nihilistic. So there clearly must be some things in this world that are more significant than nihilism, more impactful. And I find that to be related to the Logos, the video I made previously. The idea that there are languages of navigating the world. Those languages have transcendental concepts within them that go beyond nihilism. The objective world does not interact with those concepts. See, it's very interesting in the case of mathematics, because mathematics does interact with the material world, yet it also has higher precedence than a large amount of philosophy. As philosophy is all essentially a form of mathematical expression. The only time it's not is when you start getting into the realms of spirituality, yet they still operate on the same logical patterns, because mathematics appears to be a superordinate philosophy. And that's why I credit it with such importance. And music, art, literature, these all have relevancy to speech as well. So, what we've demonstrated here is that nihilism, while it appears to be so socially accepted, doesn't hold weight if you start to look into what makes people people. And that's what's interesting to me, because people still adopt it. And this isn't a rebuttal against nihilism. I'm not saying that this is the solution you should take to your next philosophy class to present to your professor and say, I've disproved nihilism, because, I'm sorry, you will have not. This is simply my experience with nihilism, my understanding of it, and why it irked me so much when I started thinking about it. I got out of nihilism by becoming an immaterialist. Whether or not that was a good thing, or virtuous, is up for debate. I don't personally raise it to that standard. By being an immaterialist and thinking about phenomenology, I believe I have a better understanding of the universe, but I can't say that that is the most efficient and iterable solution, because it's not very common. Very few people actually come to these conclusions, partially because they don't think about them, they don't abstract to the degree that I have. Also, they find it comforting. The other tragedy of nihilism is that because it's so intertwined with your psychology and neurosis, there's an appeal to it. See, that's what a lot of people misunderstand about neurosis. We think that neuroses are a negative thing, but they're actually incredibly appealing. Isn't it appealing to only care about yourself? Have to survive, even though there's no real threat? Isn't it appealing to have justified reactions, justified behaviors, by claiming that you're struggling, by claiming that it's all not your fault, but a byproduct of some neurosis, some psychological problem you have. See, people like that. And that's the problem with the modern day. I am not above questioning the fact that perhaps nihilism is only popular because it's a successful, no matter how pernicious, successful psychological excuse. A successful ignorance of your own responsibility. It's much easier to do horrible things if you're a nihilist. It's why I'm sympathetic to the religious types, because I do understand it. And in truth, religion, as opposition to nihilism, I would say that it does have the upper hand, because rational nihilism lacks one significant thing that religion doesn't, and that is the accounting of human nature. So, when it comes to nihilism, you have to understand what you're really saying. In claiming nothing matters, all you're doing is taking a very surface level analysis of the world, and in order for you to do that, you have to come to terms with the fact that you are living incongruently with the world by doing it. Because, are you telling me the food you eat is simply for sustenance? You get no pleasure from it? Are you telling me the clothes you wear don't have any impact on your embodiment? They don't have any impact over your style? They're simply things to keep you warm? Well, that's very interesting, because in my dissertation and my phenomenological study, there was evidence pointing to the fact that shops are particularly liked because of the reflection of your style. Why do you choose anything if everything is objective and factual? It's because there's other elements. So nihilism clearly isn't a successful strategy. And I want to go back to relativism, because relativism is another rather pernicious philosophy that I don't particularly like. People have this idea everything is equal because of nihilism, and it is just as much of an excuse as nihilism. If everything's equal, you don't have to ever express an opinion, you don't ever have to challenge anything. In addition, you can justify all of your behavior from a relativist perspective. I don't agree with relativism. I agree I don't agree with relativism, but that does mean there's a large pill to swallow, and that is, you have to accept that you are wrong, and you could be wrong. You also have to accept that in being relativist, or even anti-relativist, you have responsibility. You cannot be lazy, you cannot ignore your callings. You could, but then you've got to live with the consequences of that. And the modern man struggles to do that, as far as I can tell. So, the ultimate point of this video is I wanted to discuss nihilism as an interesting intellectual concept, but I also wanted to just raise a question. As I don't actually have any proof that nihilism is something a lot of intellectuals have to face. But how exactly do you all experience nihilism? Have you ever had to contend with it? Do you just ignore it? Do you accept it? Nihilism seems to beget questions, and I'm curious how many people actually contend with them. As from a phenomenological perspective, how nihilism would interact with your life world is very interesting. How you go about your day-to-day lives with this belief in nothing, that's quite interesting. And fundamentally, I view it as psychologically flawed. So, that is everything. I hope that you enjoyed it. And please do talk to me about nihilism if you have any insight into it, or you have any thoughts about it. I still haven't entirely gotten rid of nihilism, and I still haven't fully content with it. I spent a long time trying, and nihilism is one of those things very few people can actually beat and overcome. Very few philosophies can survive nihilism because nihilism has such an easy way to get out of everything. So, if you have personally overcome nihilism, I would greatly enjoy hearing your experiences with it. Anyway, without further ado, I will let you all go on with your day. So, thank you for watching. Please consider subscribing. As I said in my last one, my analytics are still atrocious. So, please do me a favor. No, that's atrocious wording. You have no reason to do anything for me. But if you enjoy this, it would be a way to show it. Anyway, I will bid you all adieu.